So now what we do, we eat and drink and eat fatty meals, for example. Why? To survive, to be alive. Now, when a human being is alive, what does that mean? That human being goes through three states of consciousness in samsara. Yeah, forget about the fourth state, which is mukti, which might happen to some of us, but it is not going to happen to all of us. But for those of us who are in this mundane world, the jivas who eat up annam and who eat annam, who drink up and who also eat tejas, what do? They are alive and they go through three stages of consciousness. That is all they do. What is their three states of consciousness? Jagrati avastha, swapna avastha, and sushupti avastha. So there also it is three. Yeah. So again, Uddalaka there, we have discussed this in the Mandukya Upanishad, where Varuna has clearly taught us that in all these three states of consciousness, the jiva is entirely dependent. The jiva actually does not make any does not have independent action at all. Is what Mandukya Upanishad, Varuna's teaching primarily is, and linking that with Omkara Tattva. Akara for Jagrati Avastha, Ukara for Swapna Avastha, and Makara for Shushupti Avastha. So that we have discussed in Mandukya Upanishad, and here also Uddalaka is reminding us of these three states of consciousness. So what did we do last week? We took up the three states of consciousness, and one of the most important states of consciousness that reminds us of our dependency with the Supreme Being was the Sushupti Avastha. Yeah. So that Sushupti Avastha is what Uddalaka takes for first discussion. So how did it go? Uddalako Arunihi Shvetaketum Putram Uvacha Swapnantam Me Somya Vijanihi iti. Okay. Yatra etat Purushaha Swapiti Nama Sata Somya Tada Sampanno Bhavati Swam Apito Bhavati Tasmadenam Swapiti Achakshate Swam Hi Apito Bhavati. Okay. So he was talking about this dreamless sleep state, and we are all experts in this now. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and mute some audio. So there is some background noise that is coming through. Let me just check. Okay, okay, yes, I've done that. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So let's keep going. So in Swapna Avastha, in Sushupti Avastha is what Uddalaka takes. And he takes the Sushupti Avastha again to illustrate the total dependency of Jiva and Brahman. Remember in the three examples, he had talked about Sadrishya and Pradhanya. In that Pradhanya, he said everything else is dependent. Now he has shown dependency in the sense we are dependent on the Supreme even for our existence. Then he has said we are dependent on the Supreme, on these three entities for the maintenance of our bodies. Then he has said we are dependent on the Supreme and these stages up and annam for everything that we eat, the digestion, everything else that happens in our bodily function, our physiology is again dependent on these three entities and the Supreme Being. And then he talks about Sushupti, again illustrating Sushupti is a classic example of total dependence. Yeah. So what is that sleep state? The Sushupti state, we said the Sushupti state is where the Jiva is not aware of the external world. It is not aware of its internal world. That is the contact between the Jiva and the mind is gone. The contact between the mind and the external world is gone. The Jiva is just himself. Yeah, he is not in touch with any of the external or the inner world. Now, in that state, what is the position of the jivas? And we all know we are utterly helpless. A burglar can come into our house, a snake can sit on our heads. We would not be aware of it. So that is our state. So what is that state? So he says that state is when he gives an example. Again, Uddalaka gives a beautiful example. What is that example? Sayata Shakuni Shutrena Prabaddo Disham Disham Patitva Anyatra Ayatanam Alabdva Bandhanameva Upashrayate Evameva Kalu Somya Tan Mano Disham Disham Patitva Anyatra Ayatanam Alabdva Pranameva Upashrayate Prana Bandhanam Hi Somya Manaiti. So this particular example is the first example of the 9 illustrations that Uddalaka gives in his famous thesis of Tat Tvam Asi. So this is the first example where he takes the example of a bird, which is the Jiva, tied to a post, which is Brahman. Okay, that Brahman is called Swam. Yeah, why is he called Swam? Because he is the Swatantram. So it's a shortened form of Swatantram. Swatantram is Swam. So this Jiva, what is it doing during the daytime? It is running around everywhere. But actually, its distance of travel is actually dictated by the length of the thread that it's tied to the pillar. That this length that dictates how much it can fly. So that is that dependence there. Okay, so the thread or the sutra there is the pranaha. Yeah, and by upalakshana, it is not only pranaha who is up, it is also tejas and annam. So this jiva, in its mundane activities of flying around everywhere, it is actually dictated by these three entities of whatever it does. It is that sutram that holds it. And what happens to it? It runs around everywhere. It is tired, and in the night time, it is so tired that it comes and sleeps next to the this pillar or the post to which the string is tied. So that is the Brahman and that is the Jiva. And the illustration is extremely clear. There is no confusion here at all. It says Pranameva upa ashrayate. Upa we all know is sitting close. Ashraya means sitting. Upa means close. Close. Pranam is this pranasya pranaha. Pranam eva means it stresses. It goes and sits next to this prana. That is why it is called swap. Swam hi apito bhavati. Therefore, it is called swam or swap. Swap is the deep sleep state. So here we finished it off there. So we need to now take it forwards where we left. So this is where our friend Uddalaka has been telling his son, look at that state of total dependence where you are different. You are next to this pillar. He has not said pranameva you become. Yeah, he didn't say when the deep sleep you become prana. Definitely not what Uddalaka has said here. All that he has said is pranameva upashrayate. So goes and sits next or rests next to Brahman or pranasya pranaha, also called Sat, also called Swam. Now, this is an important concept of Sushupti, which you all know from Mandukya Upanishad, because during our samsara, in our three phases of life, every night we go through this phase of Sushupti. Okay, but we are not aware that we are in close proximity of Brahman. Although we are in Sushupti, we are in close proximity, we are not aware of that state. Whereas moksha is that state where you are positively aware of your close association with Brahman. But still you are tied, still you are dependent, still you are distinct, but you are aware that you are always in close association with the Supreme. So that is the beauty of Uddalaka's example here, that when you think about it more, you also realize that is the state of the jivas actually even in moksha, that they somehow not become Brahman, because that is not what our Uddalaka has said. He said pranameva upashrayate. Similarly is the state of moksha also, that they are only upa ashrayate. They don't become the same. Okay, so this is an important concept. At least these are all the arguments that come in Vedantic philosophy as to what is it that the Uddalaka is telling us. Is he saying that this bird becomes the pillar, or the bird is next to the pillar? If the bird becomes the pillar and next day morning it wakes up, then the same bird has to come out again. Okay, but that is not what Uddalaka is saying. He's saying the bird is next to the pillar. So I'm just giving these kind of subtle details so that you watch the language of the Upanishads, watch the words, rather than jumping to any conclusions. Yeah, again, I've told this before. We may read the Upanishads with a hypothesis in mind, but that is not what our rishis are telling us. The rishis are telling the opposite. They're telling us, read the Upanishad carefully. Chadayanti iti chandamsi. Break open everything. Understand the Upanishad to understand the truth. Don't have your fabricated truth and then see those evidences in the Upanishads. That is very clear from what Uddalaka is telling us. HinduKnowledgeAcademy.com will celebrate Vedic culture and present its philosophies to the modern Hindu in an accessible format. Our ancient heritage is our greatest strength.
Through preservation and dissemination, together, let us spread positivity in the world. Thank you for listening and welcome to Hindu Knowledge Academy.